How I draw 7 of my best shorthand notes. If you are a deposition interpreter, you know that note-taking is of the utmost importance because it helps you to be accurate in your rendition. Now, keep in mind that everyone has their own language, meaning everyone makes their own symbols, their own signs for when they are taking notes, and that's perfectly fine. Right now, I'm just going to show you 7 of the ones that I use. And these ones are good because it's good to have symbols for the most common phrases and terms that you hear in deposition so you don't have to really waste time writing them out again. First one, for the record. You hear for the record very often. When I think for the record, I think of almost a radio or machine type thing. So this is how I draw it, a box to represent kind of the machine and then an antenna. So instead of writing out for the record, I just write this and I already know what that means. Second, to recall or to think or to remember. Do you recall when this, or can you think of this? Do you remember this date? This phrase comes out very often in depositions. For this, I just draw a cloud box like this. And why do I do this? Because sometimes when people, if you look at comic books, when people talk or when people are thinking, you'll see this. You'll see a person's head and then it'll have, a cloud like this. So when I write this, I automatically know it has to do with thinking or recalling or remembering something. Number 3, to state, to say, or even to argue. So in that case, this is how I represent to say or to state. Why do I do it like this? Because it's short for almost like a Pac-Man face. This is what it reminds me of. So when I see this, I know that this is a mouth. Now, this by itself will mean he said or she said, to say, to state. If I put two together, it's two people saying something, right? I use this to represent argument. When you and him were arguing, when the two were arguing, and so on and so forth. Next, during the time. During the time that you were dating, during the time that you were living at that location. This phrase comes up very often. For this, I draw this to represent a clock, and then during. A squiggly line to represent during the time. During the time. Now, the next one is more like a tip. Usually, or actually I will say very often in depositions, you will hear dates. Let's say that you hear March 3rd, 2020 is mentioned. When I do dates, I cut down on writing as much as possible. If it's March 3rd, 2020, I'm writing it like this, 3/3/20. When it's written in this format, I already know March 3rd, 2020. I don't need the slashes, and I don't need 2000, or excuse me, the 20 from 2020. It's unnecessary. I already know what it means. So in taking these 3 elements out, you're already cutting out on writing time. So for dates, don't put slashes, don't put 20. Next, to the best of your knowledge. To the best of your knowledge is another phrase that you hear very, very often in depositions. To the best of your knowledge, what was the amount of time it took to finish yada, yada, yada. Best of your knowledge, I just write out B-O-K. Best of your knowledge. It's a shortcut for that. Pretty simple, right? Another one. Yes, that's correct. Deponents will often answer, yes, that's correct, in response to a question that an attorney asks. instead of writing out yes, I just put a check mark. Now, if I want to say yes, that is correct, I put 2 check marks. The first one to mean yes, and the second one to mean that is correct. So you've cut down on trying to write out yes or yes, that's correct, something like that. Just 1 check mark for yes or 2 check marks for yes, that's correct. And the 7th and final shorthand note that I will be showing you is for the word immediately. Immediately. Did you immediately go there? Or did something occur immediately? It occurred immediately. In that situation, I will put an exclamation point. An exclamation point to represent that it happened right away. Sometimes when something happens right away, you emphasize it. You emphasize how quickly it was, how fast it occurred, and so on and so forth. So an exclamation point comes to mind for me when I hear the word immediately. So there you have it. For the record, to recall, think, or remember, to state, say, or to argue, during the time, how to cut down time on writing dates, to the best of your knowledge, yes, that's correct, and immediately. How I draw 7 of my best shorthand notes for depositions.